Hello, my name is Samuel Gray. I attend the University of Wisconsin-Superior. I'm enrolled in TED 494, or Principles of Inclusive Teaching, with Dr. Mary Churchill. And my topic for our final exam presentation paper is Gifted and Talented Students. An overview of my presentation, we will talk about the following things in this order. Who are gifted and talented students? How is this exceptionality defined and / or diagnosed? How does this exceptionality present itself in these students? What instructional strategies would a general education teacher use to assist these students? My conclusion and references will follow. First topic, who are gifted and talented students? While much of society might think that they are these smart geniuses that exist and get amazing grades, and they're the kids with the top grades in the class go on to gifted and talented students, that could be no further from the truth. These students are typical students, just like you and me. They just so happen to have a higher intellectual capability, and we will go more into that detail here in a little bit. Gifted and talented students are estimated to be about 8 to 12% of all students at the elementary level. However, only about 2% of those students are enrolled in a gifted and talented program. Gifted and talented students are generalized. Like I said earlier, there is a social idea that these students are the students who get the best grades, who are the most attentive, who are the greatest in class, and that is not necessarily truth. I will also want to continue by talking about the gifted stigma, that a student who is gifted is determined by society and by those who are not researchers or educators as a student who is supposed to have much better behavior, is supposed to be meeting all of the requirements, and in general, just a better student. That, again, may or may not be the case in dealing with some gifted and talented students. However, gifted and talented students are exceedingly intelligent. They have a higher capability and are generally, in some ways, more mature than students at the age level that they are placed at. And we will continue now with how this exceptionality is defined and diagnosed. Labels often happen. Like I previously said on our last slide there is a stigma given, and labels generally happen with gifted and talented students because they are of a higher capability, and they also, society wants to put a label on these students to be able to classify them, identify who they are, and track them as they go through their schooling career. The most important way that we as general education teachers are going to be able to understand what this exceptionality is through a definition. The National Association of Gifted Children, or the NAGC, says that definitions provide a framework and basis for research and development and education to occur. Definitions, there are many, many definitions of gifted and talented students throughout much of the educational research field. The NAGC defines gifted and talented students as individuals who demonstrate outstanding levels of aptitude in one or more domains. Domains being any structured area of activity with its own symbol system and / or set of sensory motor skills. Now, with this definition, that's very clear and concise, the NAGC also admits that definitions vary depending on location and research models that are accepted by state or local school districts. In Wisconsin, our Department of Public Instruction defines gifted and talented students as students who are enrolled in public schools and show high performance in intellectual, creative, artistic, leadership, or specific academic areas, and who need services or activities not ordinarily provided in a regular general education program in order to fully develop their capabilities. What is an interesting note, the Wisconsin definition states that these students, gifted and talented students, are children enrolled in public school. That is not necessarily the case. They can be homeschooled. And more importantly, national research models done by many different universities, including our own University of Wisconsin-Madison, state that this definition is a little too specific in stating that children that are gifted and talented must be enrolled in public schools, when they should really be identified as early as possible in their early childhood years, much like ADHD or autism are. In diagnosing gifted and talented students, there is a little bit of discrepancy. Teachers have sometimes a very, very difficult role, general education teachers do, in identifying and referring these gifted and talented students. A lot of the time it's because general education teacher does not know that a gifted and talented student does exist. They just see the behavioral aspects of gifted and talented students. The gifted and talented students generally have some behavioral issues going into a classroom, generally to boredom. Boredom is the primary cause of behavioral issues in gifted and talented students, because they already know the context of everything going on in the class, or they understand what is being asked of them by the teacher. They just don't feel the need to go over it. Along with behavior, another thing to look for in diagnosing gifted and talented students is very, very advanced language. Spoken language generally comes a lot earlier and proceeds to advance quite quickly in gifted and talented students. Referral process is the way that a general education teacher or a parent is able to contact a school district and get their child involved in a gifted and talented program. A lot of the time, school districts will only have a certain amount of students able to be in the gifted and talented program. So as mentioned earlier, only about 2% of a school's population are actually in a gifted and talented program, if there is such a gifted and talented program at a school district. A lot of this does lead sometimes to inequality in the referral process. That is inequality given by the general education teacher towards specific students in a socioeconomic status or different things like that. So one of the things that we want to take a look at is, how does this exceptionality present itself in students? Why are there so many missed cases? Well, one is due to inequality. A teacher might look at a student and say, well, this student is a minority, has a terrible socioeconomic background, behaves badly in class. Those aren't necessarily meaning that this student is an emotional behavioral disorder student. It might mean that that student is gifted, they're bored in the class, and yes, while they might have a terrible home life, they still are a gifted and talented student, understand all of the knowledge, and just don't see a need to go through the hoops that they portray a typical learning environment at a school. Generally, this exceptionality presents itself through the friendships that are associated with a gifted and talented child. Generally, friendships are few and far between. Gifted and talented children would much rather be alone, and rather than playing with other friends, or they would have friends that are much older than them. In some cases, 5 to 6 years older than them at the height of the elementary level. Emotions run rampant. A lot of the time, gifted and talented children have very, very developed emotions and do not understand why they have them. And so processing these emotions take a lot of time, and generally gifted and talented students rush to conclusions and get angry, might act out on those emotions, rather than actually thinking about them and being able to go through them. And that's just because their cognitive processes have not developed to the extent to be able to handle these mature emotions. Programs are very essential. Gifted and talented programs are essential in identifying, helping, and presenting gifted and talented students in and to a school district. Once students get in gifted and talented programs, their minds are, in some ways, truly activated. Education becomes fun, interesting, and intellectually challenging for them. So what strategies can a general education teacher use? The primary one is just maintaining a very developed classroom environment, one that involves general education teachers through gifted and talented students through differentiated instruction. That is pretty much one of the greatest things that you as a general education teacher can do for a gifted and talented student. Along with that, pairing the gifted and talented student maybe with a child who's in a higher grade level, or a student who's who exceeds at a higher grade level, and have that student provide sort of a mentorship for this gifted and talented student who might be at a lower grade. Reciprocal reading is very, very interesting. Going into the why of reading, reciprocal reading has a very, very beneficial use for gifted and talented students. Reciprocal reading involves questioning, clarifying, summarizing, and predicting what happens in a particular story, a book, or a problem. It's not just specific to reading a book, but it can be used in math problems, science problems, history. You know, what can we predict in history will continue. The primary and the best way to get to know a gifted and talented student is by just simply conversing with them, finding out their thought process, figuring out how they arrive at an answer, or figuring out where they go along the way, and being able to think is a fantastic knowledge to know in dealing with each specific gifted and talented student. To be able to do this, you have to use inquiry, and you have to understand their subject matter. Find things that interest them, things that pique their interest. And this is probably the simplest and most beneficial thing, is just have a conversation with them that might not be quite at the level of the other students that you teach. Through this, a general education teacher will be able to develop not only just a relationship with a gifted and talented student, but also be able to incorporate areas of their classroom environment that are specified for that student to succeed. Myths, myths, myths. Why are there so many myths? There are a lot of myths on why gifted and talented students exist, or what deems a gifted and talented student. A lot of people think, oh, well, a gifted and talented student is just a student who receives really good grades, or a gifted and talented student should just be given more work. That is not at all supporting a gifted and talented student. Intellectual learning, being able to understand completely why something is being taught, helps aid a gifted and talented student in being able to understand the contextual elements of a general classroom. Gifted and talented students do have higher capabilities, and so it's not that they need more work, but they need work, or they need education that is meaningful for them to be able to reason why they should learn it. Very, very simple. And the best thing that a general education teacher can do for gifted and talented students is just supporting them through the use of your school district's gifted and talented program, through working with the gifted and talented coordinator, through just developing an understanding, conversing, and growing a relationship with your gifted and talented students. I'd like to thank you very much for watching this video presentation of gifted and talented students for Principles of Inclusive Teaching, Dr. Mary Churchill's class at the University of Wisconsin Superior. Thank you.